July 4, 1976, Entebbe Airport, Uganda. 2,000 miles from home, deep in hostile territory. 100 Israeli commandos prepare for the impossible. Their target: rescue 106 hostages held by terrorists and protected by an entire army. The odds? Astronomical. The stakes? Absolute. Leading the assault is a unit so secretive, its very existence was classified for decades. A unit that would change special operations forever. This is the story of Sayeret Matkal, the unit, Israel's most elite warriors, and the men who redefined what special forces could achieve. Chapter 1. The birth of legends in 1954. Israel faced a crisis. Unit 101, their premier special forces unit, had been disbanded following international condemnation. The young nation was surrounded by enemies, yet had no elite force capable of deep reconnaissance and strategic operations. The Navy's Shayetet 13 was exceptional, but Israel needed something more. A land-based unit that could penetrate anywhere, gather intelligence anywhere, and strike anywhere. Enter Major Avraham Arnon, a former yeshiva student turned Palmach fighter. In 1957, Arnon approached the IDF General Staff with a radical vision: create an elite unit that would recruit only the best and brightest of Israeli youth, not just physically gifted operators who could think, adapt, and improvise under impossible circumstances. This wouldn't be another commando unit. This would be Israel's scalpel, precise, lethal, and invisible. Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion and Chief of Staff Yitzhak Rabin backed the plan. Originally designated Unit 269, the force that would become Sayeret Matkal was born. The name translates to General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, a deliberately bland title that concealed its true nature. For the next 2 decades, the unit's very existence would remain classified, operating in complete secrecy. Arnon modeled Sayeret Matkal after Britain's legendary Special Air Service, adopting their motto, "Who dares wins." But he added a uniquely Israeli twist. Members weren't just soldiers, they were scholars, thinkers, problem solvers. Many came from kibbutzim, bringing a collective mindset and agricultural work ethic that translated perfectly to the patience required for reconnaissance missions. The first recruits were hand-picked, veterans from the Palmach, Intelligence Corps survivors, and former members of Unit 101. Names like Isaac Shoshan, Meir Har-Zion, and Yehiel Amsalem became the foundation of a warrior elite. These men were trained by Bedouin trackers to understand their adversaries' tactics and terrain. They learned to move like ghosts through hostile territory, to observe without being seen, to strike without warning. Established just a year after Israel's first helicopter squadron formed, Sayeret Matkal pioneered helicopter insertion tactics that revolutionized special operations. They could now deploy deeper and stay longer behind enemy lines than any unit before them. In May 1962, 5 years after formation, Sayeret Matkal conducted its first operational mission in Lebanon. The success was total and absolute. 5 months later, they repeated it in Syria. A legend was born. Charged fire through the 1960s. Sayeret Matkal operated in complete shadow, conducting deep reconnaissance missions in the Sinai Peninsula, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon. When the Six-Day War erupted in 1967, ironically, the unit saw no combat. Their operations required such extensive planning and preparation that by the time they were ready, Israel had already achieved victory in just 6 days. But what followed changed everything. The war of attrition brought Sayeret Matkal into constant action. Arab terrorism was rising, with groups like the PLO striking Israeli civilians. Sayeret Matkal became the tip of Israel's spear, developing the world's first modern counter-terrorism and hostage rescue techniques. These weren't just tactical innovations. They were revolutionary doctrines that would influence special forces globally. In May 1972, during the Munich Olympic hostage crisis, Mossad director Zvi Zamir offered Sayeret Matkal's services to West Germany. The Germans refused, confident their Bavarian state police could handle the situation. The result was catastrophe. 11 Israeli athletes murdered in a botched rescue attempt. Had Sayeret Matkal been allowed to intervene, history might have been different. Instead, the unit would prove its capabilities in the Mossad's subsequent revenge operations, striking PLO targets in Beirut with surgical precision. The Yom Kippur War in 1973 brought profound change. Israel was caught by surprise, fighting for survival on 2 fronts simultaneously. The General Staff, overwhelmed with managing the war, had no strategic missions for Sayeret Matkal. The unit's officers split into two camps. Some argued they should remain in reserve, not risk casualties on hasty operations. Others demanded immediate action, even if it meant operating like conventional commandos rather than their usual strategic role. The action seekers prevailed. Sayeret Matkal deployed to both the Egyptian and Syrian fronts, conducting raids with minimal planning, suffering casualties but proving their worth under fire. The experience taught them a critical lesson: develop wartime operational plans in advance. When the next war came, they wouldn't wait for orders. They'd be ready to strike immediately. From this crucible emerged new capabilities. A reserve company was designated to work with the Israeli Air Force, eventually evolving into the specialized Shaldag unit. But Sayeret Matkal's own mission remained unchanged: strategic reconnaissance and special operations at the highest level. Chapter 3. Operation Entebbe, the raid that shocked the world. June 2000, 1976. Air France Flight 139, carrying 248 passengers from Tel Aviv to Paris, was hijacked by Palestinian and German terrorists. The plane was diverted to Entebbe Airport in Uganda, where dictator Idi Amin, ally of the hijackers, provided military support. The terrorists separated Israeli and Jewish passengers from the others, releasing non-Jews but keeping 106 hostages. Their demands: release 53 militants imprisoned in Israel and 4 other countries, or the hostages would be executed. Israel faced an impossible dilemma. Entebbe was 2,500 miles from Israel, deep in hostile territory. Any rescue would require flying undetected through multiple Arab nations' airspace, landing at a heavily defended airport protected by Ugandan military forces, neutralizing terrorists, rescuing hostages, and flying home, all before regional air forces could respond. Military analysts worldwide called it suicide. Sayeret Matkal saw it differently. Under the command of Yonatan "Yoni" Netanyahu, they began planning the impossible. Intelligence came from Israeli construction firms who had built the airport years earlier. They provided detailed blueprints. Mossad agents gathered real-time intelligence on terrorist positions, Ugandan military strength, and hostage locations. The plan was audacious. 4 C-130 Hercules transport aircraft would fly at wave-top height to avoid radar refuel in Kenya, then land at Entebbe in complete darkness. The first plane would carry Sayeret Matkal operators and Netanyahu's assault force, along with a black Mercedes identical to Idi Amin's personal vehicle. They would drive straight to the terminal, mimicking an Amin motorcade, catching guards off balance. Paratroopers in subsequent planes would secure the airport perimeter and destroy Ugandan MiG fighters to prevent pursuit. July 4, 1976. The Israelis came like thunder in the night. Netanyahu's Mercedes rolled up to the old terminal building, where hostages were held. Ugandan sentries, believing Amin was arriving, barely reacted before Sayeret Matkal operators cut them down with silenced weapons. The commandos burst into the terminal building. "Stay down. We are Israeli soldiers," they shouted in Hebrew and English. Terrorists raised their weapons. Sayeret Matkal's response was instantaneous and lethal. All terrorists were eliminated within minutes. But in the terminal doorway, Yoni Netanyahu was struck by gunfire from a Ugandan soldier. He fell, mortally wounded, even as his men completed the mission he'd planned. The rescue took 90 minutes from landing to takeoff. Of 106 hostages, 102 were saved. 3 were killed in the crossfire, and one elderly woman, Dora Block, who had been taken to a Ugandan hospital earlier, was murdered by Amin's forces in retaliation. All 7 terrorists were dead. 5 Israeli commandos were wounded, and Yonatan Netanyahu became the mission's only combat fatality. Operation Entebbe, called Operation Thunderbolt, later renamed Operation Yonatan in Netanyahu's honor, sent shockwaves around the world. It proved that terrorism could be defeated with courage, intelligence, and skill. West Germany's GSG-9, America's Delta Force, Britain's SAS, all studied the raid as the gold standard of counterterrorism. Sayeret Matkal, though still officially classified, had announced Israel's capabilities to the world. Chapter 4. The Warriors: Selection, Training, and Capabilities. What creates a Sayeret Matkal operator? The selection process, called Gibush, is legendary for its brutality. Twice yearly, volunteers gather for several days of continuous testing, no sleep, constant physical and mental challenges, under the watch of doctors and psychologists who evaluate every decision, every reaction, every moment of weakness or strength. Minimum requirements are daunting: a medical profile of 97 out of 100, a quality category score of 52 or higher, and an initial psychotechnic grade of 50 or more. These numbers mean nothing to outsiders, but in the IDF they represent the absolute peak of human capability. Even meeting these standards only gets you to Gibush. Most fail. Those who pass enter a training cycle lasting nearly 2 years. The training is all-encompassing. Camouflage and infiltration techniques, urban combat and room-clearing procedures, bomb disposal and mine clearance, fast rope insertion from helicopters, parachute operations, both static line and halo, navigation through hostile terrain without GPS or maps, advanced marksmanship with every weapon system imaginable, and the psychological conditioning to operate alone, behind enemy lines, for extended periods, knowing rescue isn't coming. But Sayeret Matkal doesn't just create shooters, they create thinkers. Operators study intelligence analysis, language skills, cultural understanding of enemy populations. They learn to blend in, to disappear in crowds, to operate in civilian clothes as easily as in combat gear. This is HUMINT, human intelligence gathering at its finest. The unit pioneered techniques now standard across global special forces. They perfected helicopter fast roping in the 1960s. Their extensive use of the Uzi submachine gun led them to convince Israel Military Industries to develop a folding stock version for better accuracy without sacrificing portability. This became standard issue across the IDF. Their counter-terrorism doctrines, refined through dozens of operations, influenced every hostage rescue unit in the Western world. Sayeret Matkal's capabilities today remain largely classified, but are known to include strategic reconnaissance deep behind enemy lines, counter-terrorism and hostage rescue both foreign and domestic, manhunts for high-value targets, combat search and rescue for downed pilots, black operations that officially never happened, sabotage of enemy infrastructure and weapons facilities, and HUMINT gathering through human sources in hostile territory. The unit's organizational structure is classified, but is believed to include multiple operational teams, each specializing in different mission sets, supported by intelligence analysts, combat medics trained to operate independently, communications specialists, and support personnel who handle logistics and equipment development. The modern operations and legendary alumni Sayeret Matkal's operations don't stop. During the First and Second Intifadas, they conducted hundreds of operations against terrorist infrastructure. The 2006 Lebanon War saw them operating deep in enemy territory. Operation Protective Edge in 2014 brought them honors for classified missions. And in October 2023, when Hamas launched the devastating surprise attack on Israel, capturing hostages and murdering over 200 civilians, Sayeret Matkal was among the first units deployed to hunt down terrorists and prepare hostage rescue operations. The Gaza war that followed has been brutal. By 2204, the unit had lost at least 11 operators, warriors who trained for years to reach elite status, cut down fighting to save their nation. Each loss reverberates through Israel's military community. These aren't just soldiers, they're the best Israel has. In September 2204, Sayeret Matkal demonstrated their reach with a daring raid into Syria. Operators roped from hovering helicopters into a heavily guarded underground facility near Masyaf, 25 miles north of Lebanon. Syrian guards opened fire. The commandos returned fire with devastating effect, killing approximately 18 defenders. Then they systematically destroyed the facility, an Iranian-built precision missile factory producing weapons meant for Hezbollah. They removed equipment and intelligence documents, rigged the underground complex with explosives, and extracted under fire. The entire operation took less than an hour. The message was clear: nowhere is safe from Israel's reach. But perhaps Sayeret Matkal's most remarkable legacy is its alumni. This unit has produced more leaders than any military force its size in history. Ehud Barak, former unit commander, became Israel's most decorated soldier, and eventually prime minister. Benjamin Netanyahu served in the unit, as did his brothers Yonatan, the fallen hero of Entebbe, and Iddo. Moshe Ya'alon rose from Sayeret Matkal to become IDF Chief of Staff and Defense Minister. Uzi Dayan, Nehemiah Tamari, Omer Bar-Lev. The list of generals and political leaders reads like Israel's who's who. These men share common traits forged in the unit: intellectual rigor combined with physical courage, ability to make decisions under extreme pressure, understanding that leadership means going first into danger, and the knowledge that failure isn't an option when your nation's survival depends on success. In September 2023, the IDF announced a groundbreaking change. Women would be allowed to volunteer for Sayeret Matkal for the first time, with the pilot program set to begin in November 2024. This represents a seismic shift in Israeli special operations culture. If women can meet the same impossible standards that break most men, they'll earn their place among the elite. Given Israeli women's performance in other combat units, including fighter pilots and border police, few doubt they'll prove themselves. For over 6 decades, Sayeret Matkal has operated in shadow and silence, conducting missions that will never be fully declassified, achieving victories that will never be publicly celebrated. They are Israel's hidden blade, striking with precision when diplomacy fails and conventional force is too blunt an instrument. From the deserts of Sinai to the streets of Beirut, from the terminal building at Entebbe to underground bunkers in Syria, Sayeret Matkal has proven one undeniable truth: that a small nation surrounded by enemies can survive through the courage, skill, and sacrifice of its elite warriors. Their motto, borrowed from the British SAS, remains their creed: who dares wins. In Sayeret Matkal's case, they've dared everything, and they've won every time it mattered. This is the unit. These are the Ghost Warriors, and their story is far from over. Next week, we explore Russia's Spetsnaz Alpha Group, the unit that stormed the Dubrovka Theater and fought through hell in Beslan. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it.